They said she was only a clerk in uniform, a woman who signed papers and carried files from one table to another, a helper who never touched the dust of the battlefield. The young soldiers laughed behind her back, saying she would never know the weight of real combat. They believed her calm smile and soft steps were proof that she was sheltered, safe, untouched by the fire that shaped soldiers into warriors. Her name was Captain Aisha, and she walked through the desert outpost with quiet confidence, her boots pressing lightly into the sand, her hands steady, her eyes calm. She was respected by the commander, but doubted by many of the younger recruits. They whispered that she was too clean, too gentle, too silent to ever have stood under enemy fire. They believed her whole career was built around safety, not risk, but there was something on her uniform that no one could ignore. A small patch sewn carefully on her shoulder, a patch that was given only to those who had lived through the storm of battle, a patch that carried memories of fear, of courage, of survival. It was a mark not earned in a classroom, not granted by mistake. It was a symbol that demanded respect. Yet in her case, it raised questions instead of answers. Every evening in the mess hall, the younger soldiers sat in groups, eating. Quickly and throwing glances at her table, some of them whispered to each other with mocking grins. Some shook their heads and muttered that she must have pulled strings or known someone powerful, because how else could she have gotten that patch? The same patch that seasoned fighters wore after losing friends in the field, after spilling sweat and blood under fire. They laughed quietly, saying she probably never even heard a gunshot outside of training. Captain Aisha never reacted. She carried herself with silence. Her eyes never flickered with anger or shame. She ate slowly, she listened quietly, and she walked away with the same calm dignity. Yet the silence she carried made her seem even more mysterious, like she was holding a story that no one could read, a secret that sat heavy but invisible. One night, a storm moved across the desert, sand whipping through the camp, visibility cut to nothing. The soldiers rushed to secure equipment, their voices sharp with panic. Tents flapped, wires rattled, dust crawled into every corner. In the middle of the chaos, Captain Aisha stood steady, giving short orders with a voice that cut through the storm like a blade. Her tone was not loud, but it was firm, and those who heard it followed without question. Still, even then, some muttered that a storm was nothing like combat, that she had never faced the kind of fear that came when bullets sang past your ears. But the patch, always the patch, remained on her shoulder, catching the light of the lamps, reminding everyone that there was more to her than they wanted to believe. And the more they tried to deny it, the more the mystery grew. Why did she wear it? What had she done? What had she seen? Why would someone who looked so untouched by war carry the same symbol as men with scars on their faces and memories? They could not sleep through. A few days later, a new recruit joined the outpost. Young and bold, his uniform still stiff, his confidence sharp. He noticed her on the first day and smirked when he saw the patch. He asked another soldier about her, and when he learned the rumors, he laughed openly, saying he would prove she was nothing but a desk officer. He threw careless remarks in the mess, sometimes loud enough for her to hear, sometimes whispered just enough to sting. But Captain Aisha never answered. She let the words pass like wind through empty space. The commander of the outpost watched quietly, his eyes following the way the young recruits mocked her. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Perhaps because he knew something they did not, perhaps because some truths were too heavy to speak in the open. He watched Captain Aisha carry her duties in silence, never defending herself, never showing anger, but always steady, always calm, like a mountain that did not move under storms. The whispers spread like smoke, stories twisted. Some said she had bought the patch in a market, others claimed it was an error in records, a joke of the system. Some believed she had worn it by accident and never dared to take it off. Each rumor cut at her image, but none of them touched her silence, and with every rumor the patch became heavier, more powerful, more haunting. At night in the barracks, some soldiers asked themselves if there was truth hidden under her silence. They wondered if maybe she had lived through something terrible, something she did not want to share. But doubt was easier than belief, so they convinced themselves again that she was only a helper, not a fighter, that her patch was a mistake, and the illusion remained strong. Yet illusions are fragile, and one day something would come to break it, something that would reveal why she never raised her voice, why she carried herself with quiet dignity, and why that patch on her shoulder burned with meaning far deeper than anyone dared to imagine. The days at the desert outpost moved slowly. The sun beat hard on the metal roofs. The wind carried dust into every corner. The soldiers trained, marched, cleaned their weapons, and talked, always talked, because talk was the fuel of young men, far from home, and their favorite subject was Captain Aisha and the patch she wore. Every evening, when the sun dropped low and the shadows grew long, groups of soldiers gathered in the yard, their voices low, their laughter sharp. They spoke of her as if she were a puzzle with missing pieces. Some said she had been placed there by politics. Others swore she had friends high in the chain of command. Still others claimed she had stolen the patch from someone else. The stories grew wild, feeding on doubt, on envy, on the strange discomfort of seeing a quiet woman wear the same honor they had not yet earned. The new recruit who had joined only days ago became the loudest voice among them. His name was Imran. His youth burned bright, his pride sharper than his discipline. He could not bear the idea that someone like her could carry something he had not even touched, so he mocked her openly. He told tales in the mess hall of how she once dropped a file in the mud and cried, stories that were false but easy to believe for those who already doubted her. Each lie wrapped in laughter, each word cutting deeper into the illusion they had created. Captain Aisha continued her silent routine, her eyes calm, her posture straight, her voice steady whenever she spoke. She did not rise to anger, she did not defend herself. She did not even flinch when the whispers grew louder. Some soldiers began to wonder if maybe she had grown used to this kind of talk, if maybe she had lived with doubt so long it no longer hurt. Yet the mystery of her patch only deepened with every day of silence. One afternoon during weapons inspection, a soldier dared to ask her directly, his tone sharp with false courage. "Captain, how does someone who never fired a shot wear that patch?" The yard went quiet. All eyes turned toward her, the air heavy with the tension of a question too bold, too reckless. Captain Aisha looked at him with steady eyes. She spoke softly. Her words carried no anger, only weight. "Some things are earned in ways you may never want to experience." Then she turned away, leaving the silence behind her. The soldier stood frozen, and the others whispered even more furiously after she left. That single answer spread across the camp like fire. Some soldiers swore it was proof she had seen something terrible. Others insisted it was just another trick to keep her reputation alive. Imran laughed louder than before, mocking her words, calling them empty, but deep inside even he felt a shadow of doubt, because the way she spoke, the calm in her voice, it did not sound like a lie. That night the barracks buzzed with restless talk. Some soldiers argued she had faced combat. Others denied it with passion. Their voices clashed in the dim light, each man defending his version of the truth, but none of them really knew. And that ignorance gnawed at them more than the desert heat or the endless drills. The mystery of Captain Aisha's past became the invisible battlefield inside their minds. The commander of the outpost heard the whispers too. He called Imran to his office, his voice stern, his words sharp. He warned the young recruit to hold his tongue, but Imran left the office with the same smirk, convinced the commander only defended her because of hidden orders, convinced that one day he would expose her silence for what he thought it was. A lie. A week later, during a night watch duty, a group of soldiers sat around a dim lantern, the sky black, the desert cold. They passed time with stories, and once again Captain Aisha's name rose among them. One soldier swore she had once been Stationed near the northern border where ambushes were common, another shook his head and said it was impossible that her file was empty of combat notes. Imran leaned back with a grin and declared that if she ever truly faced fire, she would have broken in fear, his words sharp, his laughter loud, yet in that same moment, a shadow moved at the edge of the camp. It was Captain Aisha walking her rounds. Her steps light, her gaze steady, she passed by the lantern circle. The soldiers froze. The laughter died. Imran looked at her patch glowing faintly under the dim light. For a heartbeat, he felt a flicker of something he could not name. Maybe fear, maybe respect. But he quickly pushed it away, calling out in mock cheer. "Tell us, Captain, what does it feel like to wear a patch you never earned?" The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Aisha stopped. Her eyes turned toward him. No anger, no smile, just calm that cut sharper than any weapon. She spoke slowly, each word weighed like iron. "One day you will learn that honor is not in words. It is in moments that test your soul." Then she walked on, leaving the group stunned. The desert night swallowing her figure. The soldiers sat frozen, their laughter gone, their whispers muted. The patch on her shoulder no longer looked like a simple piece of cloth. It looked like a shadow of something bigger, something hidden, something none of them could yet understand. And for the first time, doubt turned not only on her, but also on themselves, because deep inside they wondered if the day would come when the truth of her patch would be revealed in a way they could never deny. The whispers did not stop. They grew louder with each day. And the silence of Captain Aisha only made them heavier. The young soldiers kept circling around the same question. How could a woman so quiet, so calm, so untouched by scars carry a patch that belonged only to those who had seen the fire of battle, the weight of blood, the face of fear? The questions piled like sand in the wind, yet the answers never came. But one night, as the camp rested under a pale moon, Captain Aisha sat alone near the edge of the outpost, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Where the desert met the stars, she touched the patch on her shoulder, her fingers pressing softly against the threads, and her mind drifted back, far back, to the place where the illusion began, a place she rarely let herself remember, a place that smelled of smoke and rang with the sound of gunfire. It was 3 years earlier, in the northern valley where villages sat between mountains. The air there was sharp with cold, the soil dry, and the silence often broken by sudden violence. Captain Aisha had been younger then, full of discipline but also untested. Her unit had been sent to patrol a narrow route that cut through cliffs, a place known for ambushes, a place where even the bravest felt a chill in their bones. The patrol began quietly, boots crunching on gravel, rifles steady, radios crackling with short commands. Then the world exploded. The cliffs erupted with gunfire, shadows of enemies flashing from above, bullets slicing the air, dust and smoke swallowing the valley. Chaos roared, and soldiers dropped for cover, hearts racing, breaths sharp, fear pressing heavy on every chest. Aisha remembered the shock of that first moment, the taste of dust in her mouth, the sting of rock shards as bullets struck near her. She was not supposed to lead. She was only supposed to observe. But when the commander was hit in the first volley, the chain of order broke. Panic spread like fire. Voices screamed, bodies pressed low, and the enemy kept raining bullets from the heights. She saw 2 comrades trapped in the open, one bleeding badly, the other pinned with fear, their cries for help mixing with the roar of fire. No one moved. Every soldier frozen by the storm. But Aisha's heart pounded with a different rhythm. She remembered the words drilled into her during training, that leadership was not in rank, but in action, and in that moment she chose to move. She dashed from cover, her body low, her breath burning, bullets slicing the space around her. She grabbed the wounded soldier first, dragging him toward a rock, his blood soaking into her sleeve. Then she turned back for the second, shouting at him to move, to crawl, to fight against his fear, and somehow he responded, crawling with trembling limbs while she covered him with bursts of fire from her rifle, her hands steady though her heart raged like thunder. The fight lasted long, the minutes stretched like hours, but slowly the unit regained order, following her voice, finding courage in her calm. Together they pushed back. They secured a path out of the valley, carrying their wounded, leaving none behind. When the dust finally settled and silence returned, the valley smelled of smoke and the ground was littered with empty shells and broken stone. The unit was shaken but alive, alive because someone had dared to rise when others froze. Later, in the safety of base, the commanders looked at her differently. They listened to the reports. They saw the testimonies of the soldiers she had saved, and they knew she had faced the test of fire. They placed the patch on her uniform not as a gift, not as a decoration, but as recognition of what she had carried through that valley, of what she had done when the storm of battle tried to break her. But Aisha never spoke of it. She did not wear the patch to boast. She did not share her story in mess halls or barracks. For her, it was not a badge of pride. It was a memory of blood and dust, of fear overcome, of choices that carved scars invisible to the eye. She wore it because it was part of her, but she let silence guard the details, silence that protected her from reliving the screams and the smoke back in the desert outpost. Her eyes blinked as the memory faded, the patch still under her fingers, the moonlight brushing against her face. She breathed slowly, knowing that those around her would never truly understand, unless the time came when illusions had to break. When the same fire she once faced would return in another form, she hoped that day would never come. But deep inside, she knew the desert had a way of testing those who thought themselves untouched, and so she rose, her back straight, her steps steady as she walked away from the edge of the camp. Her secret safe for now, the soldiers still whispering, in the shadows, still doubting, still mocking, but the truth resting quietly on her shoulder, stitched in cloth, burning with memory, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be enough. The desert outpost was quiet in the early morning, the sky painted with pale light, the soldiers half awake, yawning as they cleaned their gear. Captain Aisha moved among them with the same calm steps, her patch catching a faint glimmer of dawn. The whispers had not ended. If anything, they had grown sharper. Yet no one dared to ask her again. Her silence was too heavy, her calm too unsettling. Then the unexpected arrived. The outpost was ordered to run a surprise drill, a full simulation. Of an enemy strike, alarms blared across the camp. Boots thudded on the hard ground. Soldiers rushed for weapons. Tents shook as men scrambled into positions. Dust rose into the air like smoke. Panic laced with adrenaline filled the camp, and in the middle of it all, Captain Aisha stood still, her eyes scanning, her voice low but steady. The commander barked orders, but in the chaos his words scattered like leaves in the wind. The radios crackled, then died. The line of communication snapped, and young recruits froze with confusion, some shouting over each other, some standing lost with rifles in their hands, their discipline crumbling under the weight of sudden disorder. Fear showing on faces that had never truly seen. Combat Captain Aisha stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise, clear and sharp. Form 2 groups, cover the west wall, keep low, move fast. Her tone carried authority that made even the loudest voices fall silent. The recruits blinked, hesitated, then obeyed. Her instructions quick, precise, born not from guesswork, but from memory of nights when real bullets had rained and real blood had spilled. Imran, the bold recruit, stood among them, his smirk gone, his eyes wide. For the first time he saw her not as a mystery but as a force. His body moved almost against his will, drawn by the weight of her command. He ran with the others, taking positions. Where she pointed, his heart racing, the drill suddenly feeling less like a game and more like a true test of survival. The drill grew more intense. Simulated explosions rocked the yard, smoke grenades spread thick clouds. The soldiers coughed, stumbled, lost sight of one another. Confusion threatened to break them again, but Aisha's calm voice rose once more. "Stay low. Follow the sound. Trust your training." Her words steadied their breaths, her presence anchored their movements, and slowly order returned. She led them through the drill step by step, moving with precision, crouching low, signaling with her hand when words could not carry, covering blind spots with sharp awareness, every gesture a lesson, every command born of experience carved in fire. The recruits who once mocked her now followed her as if their lives depended on it, because in that moment it felt like they did. Commander watched from the tower, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed not in doubt, but in respect. He saw how the young soldiers who once whispered now moved as a single unit under her guidance. He saw how the chaos bent to her calm, how the silence she carried was not weakness, but power, waiting for the right moment, and he knew the test had come. By the time the drill ended, the yard was filled with heavy breathing, faces covered in sweat, uniforms dirtied by smoke and sand. Yet the soldiers stood in formation, steadier than before, their eyes shifting toward Captain Aisha with something new, something unspoken. No one laughed, no one whispered. Silence wrapped around them, but it was not the same silence of doubt. It was the silence of awe. Imran felt it most, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his heart still racing. He looked at her patch, glowing faintly through dust and sweat, and for the first time he did not feel the urge to mock. His voice caught in his throat, his pride cracked by the weight of what he had seen. She had turned chaos into order, fear into focus. She had done what he could not even imagine, and the illusion he had built in his mind began to shatter. That night the campfire burned low. Soldiers gathered quietly, their faces serious, their voices hushed. Some replayed the drill in their minds, others glanced toward Aisha sitting alone, her figure steady as always. One soldier finally whispered, "She has seen it before. That is why she knew." The others nodded slowly, the truth pressing against their doubts, heavy and undeniable. Imran sat closest to the fire, his gaze fixed. On her, he felt torn between shame and respect. He wanted to ask her. He wanted to know what the patch truly meant, but his voice would not rise. Instead, he listened to the silence, a silence that now felt different, not empty, but full of memories they could not yet see, full of battles they had never fought, full of strength that was hidden behind calm eyes. Captain Aisha remained quiet, her hands folded, her gaze on the flames. She knew the drill had changed something. She knew the whispers had lost their bite, but she also knew that the real test of belief was still to come. For illusions can bend in drills, but they only break fully in moments of truth, and she felt in her bones that such a moment was waiting. Beyond the horizon, the desert night was quiet, the stars wide and endless above. The fire at the center of the camp burned low, shadows flickering across tired faces. The soldiers sat together, but no laughter rose, their voices hushed, their eyes heavy with thoughts. The drill had left them shaken in ways they could not admit, and in the middle of it all was the silent figure of Captain Aisha, her patch glowing faintly in the firelight like a secret they could no longer ignore. For days, the whispers had shaped her image. For weeks, doubts had painted her as an outsider. But now silence ruled the camp. Not the silence of scorn, but the silence of respect. The young soldiers looked at her with new eyes. Even Imran, once the loudest doubter, sat still, his pride swallowed, his mind replaying every command she had given, every calm word that pulled them back from fear. He could not laugh anymore. The weight of truth pressed too hard against his chest, yet curiosity still burned, the patch still pulled at their thoughts, the mystery still demanded an answer. Around the fire, one soldier finally broke the silence, his voice soft, almost afraid. "Captain, that patch, is it real?" The words hung heavy in the night. The fire crackled, the desert wind moved gently. Everyone waited, breath held, eyes fixed on her. Aisha lifted her gaze, her eyes calm, her face unreadable. She touched the patch lightly with her fingers, her voice low but steady. "I did not ask for it. I did not want it, but I earned it." The words rolled into the silence like stones dropped into water, ripples spreading through every heart around the fire. No one dared to speak after her, because her tone was not one of pride, not one of defense. It was the tone of someone who carried memories too heavy to share. Imran's throat tightened. He wanted to ask more, to demand details, but the strength in her eyes stopped him. Something deep inside told him that whatever story hid behind that patch was not one to be told lightly. It was not a tale for laughter or gossip. It was a scar carried quietly, and for the first time he bowed his head, not from command, but from respect. The soldiers sat in silence, the fire crackling, the stars watching above, each man thinking of battles they had not yet faced, of fear they had not yet tasted, and of the quiet strength sitting across from them. They realized then that honor did not always shout. Sometimes it walked in silence, sometimes it spoke only when needed, and sometimes it sat alone, letting others doubt, because truth did not need defense. The commander approached the fire, his boots crunching on the sand, his eyes steady on the young recruits. He stood behind Aisha, his voice carrying weight. "You ask questions that you do not yet deserve answers for, but know this, the patch she wears is more real than the breath. You draw, one day you may face the same test, and on that day you will understand why she never explains." His words fell like iron, leaving no room for argument, and the soldiers bowed their heads deeper. Later that night, when the fire burned to embers, Imran found himself unable to sleep. He rose quietly and walked to where Aisha sat alone near the edge of camp, the desert wind cool against his face. He hesitated, then spoke softly. "Captain, I doubted you. I mocked you. I was wrong." Aisha turned her eyes toward him, her gaze steady, her voice